go along the buildings, the houses on their route, you know, hiding really from predators. And after a while I got kind of comfortable with that, and then it would follow right behind the dog, but it had a border, and if my dad took the dog over one street too many for the cat would just sit on the corner and you know, cry like a cat cries. It was like, that's it for me, man, I'm not going any farther out into the unknown. And so the distinction between the territory that you have mastered and the territory that you haven't mastered is a fundamental distinction. It's the distinction between home and the strange land. And the thing about familiar territory for people is that most of the familiar territory that we inhabit is other people, because we're so social. So you can't really think, it's a weird way of thinking about territory. It's not exactly geographical objective territory, it's territory with a dominance hierarchy in it. And the dominance hierarchy has a predictable structure, and you know where you fit in it most of the time, and so that when you act out in that territory surrounded by your people, then often you get what you want, and you're so thrilled about that because you just don't want someone acting erratically around you, like, and you know that. So you walk down Bloor and there's people there that should really be institutionalized, but we deinstitutionalized them all so they could be free, and free to be, you know, suffering and malfunctioning out on the street. That's what the freedom ended up being. But you know, you'll walk by someone like that who's muttering away to the voices in his head, and you know, maybe striking out against whatever it is that's plaguing him, and you won't make eye contact. You might even go across the street. You're certainly going to give him a wide berth. You're going to keep a distance between him and you, and you're going to hope that you don't attract his attention, because he's not in the dominance hierarchy and you don't know what the hell he might do. And that's unexplored territory too. That's another way of thinking about it. Like, we inhabit time and space, not just space and not just time. We inhabit time and space, and our territories are spatial temporal. We're here now, and this is safe now, and it's safe partly because of the physical structure and it's working, but it's also safe because none of you are manifesting peculiar behavior. But if you started to manifest peculiar behavior, if you stood up and started muttering or yelling, or maybe attacking someone next to you, all the rest of you would freeze first, because then all of a sudden this would be unexplored territory. The match between what you want, which is a peaceful lecture that you hope has some content, the match between what you want and what's happening has vanished. And so then you don't know where you are. And so then what do you do when you don't know where you are? What do you do when you don't know what to do? Well, if you're a computer, you just crash. But you know, what good is that to you? You're just going to die? That isn't helpful. You freeze first, and then maybe you cautiously attend, or maybe you don't. Maybe you just keep your damn eyes averted and you sit there and you hope that no one notices you. That's a prey response, right? That's like a rabbit frozen when it thinks a fox is looking at it. And we were prey animals for a long time. There was a cat that they recently discovered, a prehistoric cat that had this bottom single tooth, and they found out that a human skull fit right inside its mouth, and so it could grab you here and pierce the back of your skull with its single tooth, and that's what it was evolved for. So, you know, it's under such conditions we evolved, and we're predators obviously, but we're tasty predators, and so other things were perfectly happy to eat us. And so when you're where you don't know what to do, you act like a prey animal, and that's probably what you should do, because maybe if you keep your head down and shut the hell up, there won't be any attention attracted to you, and maybe you'll get through it. You know, you might decide, unlikely, to intervene and take the guy down, but you would be the exception rather than the norm, and it's unsurprising. Okay, so what I came to understand was that belief systems regulated emotions, but not exactly psychologically. Like it isn't exactly, and this is sort of like the terror management theories, it's not exactly like you have a theory in your head and the theory explains the world, and because the theory explains the world, the theory is what's making you secure. It's kind of like that. It's like you have a theory in your head and the theory makes you feel secure because it explains the world, but the reason it explains the world is because other people have the same theory in their head, and then when you both act out the theory, you both get what you want. And it's the coming together of the theory and the outcome that makes you, it's life. Not only does it stop you from being anxious and often make you happy because you get what you want, but it's not just psychological, you know, the fact that we do this, that we cooperate within our societies, we match our belief systems and then act them out, that's the predicate for a productive society. So it's actually, it isn't just that it saves you from death anxiety like the terror management theorists have it, it saves you from death, and that's good. I mean, being protected from death anxiety, yeah, good, that's great too, man, but actually not dying, that's sort of the fundamental thing that you're after. And so people have reason to defend their territory, if you think of territory that way, as you think about it as a domain where the fundamental presuppositions of each citizen are matched by the behavior of their co-citizens. They have every reason to defend that, and if it falls apart, it can have mortally serious consequences. It's chaos, you know, and that chaos doesn't just destabilize everybody psychologically, it destabilizes everything. It can destabilize the currency, it can destabilize the industrial economy, the lights can go off, it's like, it's not good. So, hey, no wonder people protect it. So then I started thinking about what a belief system was. And I realized that a belief system was actually a set of moral guidelines. And moral guidelines are guidelines about how you should behave, also how you should perceive. And the reason that a moral guideline is necessary for you to perceive is that you can't look at anything without a hierarchy of value, right? Think about it, like how many things in this room could you look at? There's innumerable things in this room to look at. There's just all this squares, the little tiny squares in this fabric. You could look at those things for till the end of time, one at a time, but you don't do that. In fact, if I took most of you out of this room, there's a very low probability that you'd be able to tell me what color the walls were, or even if those things were on the walls. And the reason for that is that who cares? As long as the walls don't move, color is irrelevant, and there's no reason for you to remember it. It has no emotional significance. It has no value. And so what you do instead is, well, this is what you're doing. So why are you here? I don't mean in the broad metaphysical sense. I mean specifically, why are you here right now? And I would say, well, you're students, obviously, and you're trying to get a degree, and you know, you believe that that will have some functional utility. Maybe you'll be a little wiser and a little more literate and be able to think a little better and be able to write a little better, and so you'll actually be more functional in the world. That would be good, you know, and maybe you're interested, but anyways, you're in this particular lecture so that you can take this particular class, so that you can get a particular kind of degree, so that you can launch your life, and then in your life you're probably going to meet someone that you have a long-term relationship with, and you're going to have children, and you're going to partake in this society, and that's why you're here. All of those reasons simultaneously is why you're here. And so then that helps you decide what to look at. And so what you look at is, at the moment, or listen to, is me, because in principle I'm the gateway to that set of accomplishments at this moment, and so you focus on me, and that's because you value that. And so what that means is you can't even look at the world without a value structure. You know, it's chaos, if everything is equally unimportant or if everything is equally important. It's chaos. And so a value system structures the very way that you perceive the world, and I don't mean that metaphysically. There's plenty of experiments that have demonstrated that, like the invisible gorilla experiment, which, how many of you know about the invisible gorilla experiment? How many don't? Well, roughly speaking, what happens is that there are two teams, a white team dressed in white and a team dressed in black, and there's a video of them, and the black team is passing a basketball back and forth and the white team is passing a basketball back and forth, and you're supposed to count the times the basketball gets passed back and forth. There's only one basketball. And so, you know, you're diligent for whatever reason, you do what the experimenter asks you, and you count the basketball tosses and you think, well, that's not so hard, it's like 16. So you tell them 16, and they say, did you see the gorilla? And half of you say, what are you talking about? And the experimenter says, well, let's watch again, but this time don't count. Well, sure enough, like 30 seconds into the video, and you know, the players fill the video screen. It's not like they're 300 yards in the distance, you know, like little ants playing basketball. They're right filling the screen. You can see their faces. Sure enough, a minute into the video, this guy in a gorilla suit, and he's not little, and neither is the gorilla suit, he comes out, bangs his chest right in the middle of the screen for 5 seconds, and then disappears. And more than half actually of people don't see that. And it's even worse. Dan Simon did another experiment where you're at a counter, you know, at a store, and there's a clerk there, and you're talking to the clerk, and the clerk goes down hypothetically to get something, and a different clerk pops up, and you'd think, hey, I'd notice that, but you don't. And you can even vary the clerk quite a bit, and people don't notice. So we focus on very particular things, and the reason we don't notice is because it actually doesn't matter. In terms of our ongoing action at that point, the clerk is interchangeable. As long as the entity there acts like a clerk, that's sufficient. So, belief systems structure your perceptions, value systems, we're going to call them value systems. They structure your perceptions, and they also guide your actions, because you act in accordance with your values, conscious or unconscious. You have values that you don't know about because you just don't know yourself very well. You can tell that you have values that you don't know very well because sometimes you get attracted to people that you know perfectly well that's a mistake, or you're trying to tell yourself to study and you don't, and so you're not really in control of yourself to any great degree. Some, and the more integrated you are, the more control you have, but you're kind of a loose collection of arguing sub-personalities, and they're more or less directed towards a single goal, but it depends on how committed you are to that goal, how much you've thought it through, how much you buy into it, how many of the contradictions in your world representation you've managed to iron out, and all of that. So, but in any case, it's value systems that govern action and perception. And so we're going to take an existential perspective, a phenomenological and an existential perspective in this course. And phenomenological means that we're going to base our presuppositions on the idea that what you experience is real, all of it. We're not really dividing the world into object and subject. That isn't how this particular approach works. It's more like you have a field of experience. It includes things like pain, which is not really something objective, but it's real. One of the things I've come to understand is you are not required to believe what I'm telling you, by the way. If you have an argument about why some of this doesn't make sense, then follow that sucker, because I'm trying to tell you what I've reached with regards to bedrock presuppositions, and I haven't been able to put pry bars underneath them, but that doesn't mean you won't.